Quick thoughts on ChatGPT's agentic commerce launch, which they're calling instant checkout this morning. I've got a lot of thoughts here, and they won't all fit into kind of one update, but I wanted to touch on kind of what's actually in this and what the impact is going to be for kind of e-commerce operators who we've had a bunch of conversations with over the past few months. I think to start with, this has been a widely anticipated product launch, and it's exciting to see it finally go live. I think the fact that OpenAI has been working on this is perhaps the worst kept secret in consumer AI over the past 4 or 5 months or so. I think every e-commerce person I've talked to in that time has either told me about this or has asked me about this. And so it's great that it's out in the open and we can dig in further. As a recap, if you're not super familiar with ChatGPT shopping as is, ChatGPT shopping is an experience that just brings product search and discovery into the ChatGPT interface. So you can get product recommendations, and when you open these product recommendations, you also get recommendations for places you could go buy the product. And there's structured metadata around things like pricing, product availability. You can sometimes pick colors and sizes depending on the product category, and you get information about like reviews that are summarized from around the web. So a bunch of things in here that I think are widely not appreciated enough about how shopping works. The main one being that actually product recommendations and merchant recommendations are two separate things. That's super important for this launch for a reason I'll come back to. But basically what this is extending is that instead of just discovery where you go offsite and like check out through a normal website interface, you can now do that cart building and checkout and payment flow directly inside ChatGPT. So, again, widely rumored, super important. If you have ChatGPT as a major source of conversions, or if it's important in your category, something you certainly need to pay attention to in e-com. Now, if you are most merchants, the way you integrate with this is going to be through a platform or a partner. So the launch partners here are Etsy. So if you're an Etsy seller, Etsy will take care of the moving parts for you here. If you are on Shopify, you're a Shopify merchant, Shopify is a launch partner. And so it sounds like rolling out a little bit later, but we'll also be enabling all Shopify stores for this. TBD, if this is like something that you just get enrolled in, or if it's a checkbox, or if there's some other sort of enablement you need to do yourself, but the technical pieces will be handled for you. And then for Etsy and Shopify, at least, they're also taking care of sort of the partnership approach. One major thing to know about this is, the positioning here is this is an agentic commerce protocol. There's like a technical integration you can do. It's an open standard. But to actually get your data into ChatGPT, you still have to fill out a form, and your application has to be reviewed by the OpenAI team. And if it's approved, only then do the technical parts here actually matter. Now, again, it sounds like some platforms are going to take care of that for merchants, and I would predict that list would expand. So if you're on a major e-commerce platform, not just a Shopify, but also a BigCommerce, something like that, likely, a lot of this will be taken care of for you, and you should reach out to your partner to learn more about that. Now, if you aren't on a major e-commerce platform and you have your own e-commerce stack, maybe you're a really large merchant, maybe you just have chosen to go with like a bespoke solution, you'll need to dig into the details of this. The good news is actually the details are kind of straightforward. And if you've experienced other types of shopping integrations, like with Google Shopping, or Perplexity sort of got a similar product integration that's out there, then the moving parts here are going to seem very similar. There's a product feed, which is all about giving structured information about your products to the platform. So syndication, there's sort of a cart building API. And then for something that will really matter for only a very small fraction of people, there's also some payment rails details here. Mostly this is only going to be handled by like a payment service provider, a large e-commerce platform. If you're a massive merchant and you handle, for example, your own like consumer credit card detail vaulting, you should read the spec. Most people won't need to. So from a sort of technology perspective, the mechanisms here, I would say, really are incremental rather than revolutionary. And that's a good thing. I know there was a lot of speculation about this, integration, for example, maybe having like a lot of agentic behaviors where like an agent would browse sites and check out for you, and they may still launch that in the future. But this is really kind of a more straightforward, like synchronous, if I'm totally honest with you, not that agentic checkout protocol. And it's going to function in kind of a normal way if you've implemented partnerships like this before. So the other things I would definitely call out here are how this is going to impact visibility for product manufacturers and for merchants, and it's going to impact them differently. Obviously, some folks are in both categories. We have a lot of customers who are in the DTC category, so they make and sell their own products. We have folks who are manufacturers who also operate storefronts. we have some folks who are sort of hybrid, so mostly DTC, but they also distribute through third parties. And so in each of those cases, the impact here is going to be slightly different. And I have to give OpenAI some credit here because often they're fairly mysterious about like what ranking factors are in ChatGPT for different things. You sort of have to figure it out. But they're actually calling out in this launch that product recommendations should not be impacted by whether or not you choose to integrate with instant checkout. So, if your products are showing up in ChatGPT Shopping today, you're being recommended and you don't integrate with this instant checkout program, and you also, maybe none of the merchants that sell your products do it. If you have good visibility today, your product should still be visible tomorrow after this sort of feature rolls out, at least if you believe what OpenAI is saying here. And so, like, for example, if you're a DTC company and you're the only person who sells your products online, if your product is visible, you're going to be the merchant that shows up here. Like, you should be good to go if you choose not to integrate with this. And you may want to integrate with it for other reasons, but you're sort of not going to be forced to for competitive reasons. On the other hand, they are also explicitly saying that instant checkout is a ranking factor for merchant recommendations. And so what that means is, again, there's sort of a two-part thing here. Product recommendations are in the main experience of ChatGPT. Merchant recommendations are in the sidebar on the right on desktop, slightly different on mobile. And so if you are competing with other merchants here, it's not enough just to have your products recommended. You also need to show up in this list and ideally be the preferred option. And so that is where, if your competitors are doing this and you're not, you may be penalized in terms of visibility and ultimately in terms of sort of conversions coming from the ChatGPT channel as this rolls out. And I think that's sort of been underreported on so far. So I know I've seen a bunch of questions on that. I've seen a bunch of people point to the fact that they do have this nice statement about recommendations remaining independent for products. I haven't seen that many folks point out that the merchant recommendations are indeed going to be impacted by choosing to integrate with this or not. Other than that, definitely note that, the positioning here is still, this is, them sort of introducing customers to you and interoperating with your e-commerce platform. OpenAI is not the merchant of record. They don't handle returns. They're not retaining payments. A lot of the moving parts here are really around making sure that that's the case for them. There's some differences, it sounds like, in terms of like who gets the version of the feature where payment details are filled out, which seems like the best part, the most convenient part. And it sounds like it's only going to be paid plans for now, which I think is an interesting choice, probably driven by like risk and scale that might change later. And then, although you may have access to the contact information of the shopper, they do, from a program policy perspective, not want you to do any sort of remarketing to the people you acquire through this channel, or at least I would assume you would need to get some sort of separate consent or opt-in before it was okay to start, sending mail campaigns to folks who had checked out this way in the past. So that's something certainly to be aware of when you think about the value of folks converting through the channel and just like moving parts you might need to support in your backend systems for customers who are getting this way. A lot more that could be said here. And overall, I think very exciting to see this roll out. Not totally unfamiliar based on other things that have launched in the past, but ChatGPT, is a behemoth in terms of consumers for generative AI, probably close to 1 billion weekly active users. And I think although the number of folks really trying to use these AI tools for shopping experiences is still fairly low, it is growing. And so going to be a big important channel for many folks in the future, just getting started in terms of the way this stuff is going to work in terms of interoperability between OpenAI and e-commerce. So more soon. And as always, let me know if you have questions. I'm happy to try to answer.